they need to realise that on certain issues, centrism is not where they think it is. Centrism wants radically lower migration. Who do you think could be next?
I'm going to stick my neck out and also risk assassination. So it hasn't been a happy period for Keir Starmer. But then it's also been the case that there's been another chapter in turbulence on the right. We've had another defection to reform. Suella Braverman was unveiled as Nigel Farage's latest recruit this week at a Veterans for Reform rally. I should say that Suella's not one of the veterans. They were army veterans, but Suella was there as the sort of, the star of the show. Not the Vera Lynn, but the star in her own right. I don't know, Maddie, did you anticipate that Suella would defect? Do you think it's a coup for reform? Does it change the terms of trade?
Well, I think that it was understood that she was, had been very unhappy for a long time. And with Robert Jenrick's departure, it seemed fairly inevitable. I guess almost the question mark was, would Reform UK want to have another Tory so soon after the last one? Because, there is also there is this feeling of, this is becoming a place for the Tory also has-beens or also-rans. So that from that perspective, but no, broadly, I wouldn't say I was that surprised. It was almost like people were wondering, when, not if something like this would happen. Does it change the terms? Certainly from the Tory perspective, just as they were potentially having a win on the Chagos deal, which has been the product of a lot of lobbying from the right in general, from Reform UK, from Nigel Farage and from Tory. And then, of course, in the House of Lords, the Tory peers have put up a really strong fight, and they unearthed the fact that the 1966 US-UK agreement on Diego Garcia might be compromised by the deal with Mauritius. So just when, and of course then you have the Burnham mess, just as these things are happening, there's another defection, and now that occupies the debate. So from that perspective, it's really difficult for the Conservative Party to make a case for what they are doing. I think what's actually far more damaging to the Conservatives' prospects than this yet another defection is actually the calls now from the kind of centre wing, or what was the centrist Tory party, in the form of Prosper. I think that's very unfair on the what I consider the original Thatcher era Wets, who are cut above. No, I'm not anti all the Wets. I mean, some of them I think are very intelligent people that have achieved a lot. But it was very unhelpful timing that they published this letter saying we want the Tory party to return to these principles.
So that's the new group you mentioned.
It's called Prosper UK, yes.
Which has Andy Street, the former mayor of the West Midlands, Ruth Davidson, the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Amber Rudd, the former Home Secretary, David Liddington, the former Chancellor,
David Gauke,
Duchy of Lancaster, and David Gauke, the former Justice Secretary.
There's lots of formers. Jinx.
Yes.
Michael, when are you going to put your name?
No. Who've all joined together to essentially create this sort of new pressure group to nudge or consolidate the arguments for a sort of one nation centrist, however you want to define it, Tory position. I did look down the list of names, and there are lots of people there who are friends. The interesting thing is that I think of all of the names there's only one, I could have this wrong, Trudy Harrison, used to be the MP for Copeland and Cumbria, former Environment Minister, that voted for Brexit. Everyone else was a Remainer. I mean, that probably, that's not surprising. I mean, it's almost sort of, the sort of glue or the characteristic behind it.
And a reason for the disappointment, and in the first place, that has led some people to leave the party altogether.
Quite.
Yes.
Quite. So, in a way, they're both Suella going to reform, and also the departure of Suella and Rob Jenrick and Danny Kruger and others, creating, for those who follow that sort of particular sort of centrist vibe, sensing an opportunity. The two are parallel developments. And I don't think either of them, even though they're predictable, are necessarily brilliant news for Kemi. So Team Kemi will have foreseen the high risk of Suella defecting, and they will also be aware of this pressure. Last week, Kemi spoke to the core team of the right within the Parliamentary Conservative Party, the Common Sense group led by John Hayes. They the group called the 92. I know that there are a proliferation of groups, sorry about this, listeners, that it acts as the umbrella for the broad right within the Conservative Party to reassure them, and indeed they were, on the basis of what she said, reassured that there would be no slippage to the left or centre under her leadership. But in the churn of events in Westminster, the launch of Prosper UK would mean that the wet centrists would say, look, the momentum is with us in reshaping the Conservative Party. And that's a narrative that actually Suella and her team would reinforce by saying, well, of course, the reason I left is because these guys are in the ascendant.
Yeah, exactly. And Farage, in fact, and Suella Braverman both referred to it in their press conference yesterday. So I think very unhelpful timing for people concerned, people that sort of consider themselves right-leaning Tories.
But I don't think it is actually the truth about what is happening within the Parliamentary Conservative Party, as we both noted.
But it must come from a position of weakness, as in this group must think the party's in flux and the leader is under pressure. Now is an opportunity for us to try and reassert our hold over the party.
So what they're trying to say is, Kemi, you're a reasonable person. You're a member of the reality-based community. You must realise that the right are false friends and we're your real friends.
Yeah.
But the fact that we both lighted the preponderance of formers brings to the forefront a feeling I have, which is, most of the people who will sign up to Prosper UK are palpably decent people, good public servants. However, I think they've missed how, not just the Conservative Party, but how politics has changed in Britain. And someone like Nick Timothy or Neil O'Brien or Katie Lamb, so the rising generation of talent within the Conservative Party, Nick Timothy would say he was one nation. Neil O'Brien was the architect of levelling up, the champion of the Northern Powerhouse. His economic views are, if anything, Heseltinian. He's not a purist libertarian free marketeer. Katie Lamb, indeed, has positioned herself there economically. So they're not Thatcherites of the past reborn. And that demonstrates the fact that the Conservative Party, the right overall, has changed from the old divisions and the old positions of the past. And I think, while I respect Suella's decision, I think her characterisation of where the Parliamentary Conservative Party isn't accurate.
I think they handled it very badly, though, the Conservative Party. I mean, putting out that awful statement talking about Suella Braverman having mental health problems. I mean, what were they thinking? I mean, Reform UK did some terrible briefing around when they kicked out Rupert Lowe. They implied to reporters that he had dementia, which I think is, my father has dementia. I felt really personally offended that they would just use that as a kind of way to win an argument or something. But that kind of innuendo is actually very low and not befitting.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. I mean, I worked with Suella and know her quite well, I think. I have a lot of respect and affection for Suella. She's often been unfairly stigmatised, caricatured. There is a thing about non-white women assuming right-wing positions. Kemi suffered from it, Priti Patel suffered from it, Suella has suffered from it as well. All three of them would never want sympathy shown towards them, or let alone pity. They're strong characters. And Suella, I think, was brave in some of the things that she said, particularly around the hate marches and the need for a tougher line against Islamism. And in person, she is a kind and delightful person, very different from the caricature that's been painted of her. So I think that she is perfectly entitled to make her own decision as a strong, independent woman as to which political party she should join. And as I say, I think some of the things she said about the Conservative Party are inaccurate, but that's by the by. And I therefore feel all the more, exactly as you say, irritated that there was this, at best ungallant, at worst just totally cack-handed briefing about with the invocation of mental health and all the rest of it. I have a high threshold for unhappiness about insults in politics. I think politics is a contact sport, but I do agree with you, and I was pleased to see that there was a, albeit too late, withdrawal of those comments.
I feel that a lot in politics now, and particularly on the right, is there's a big fracture emerging between the people who think that everything is broadly okay and the people who think that Britain is broken
Yes.
and we need wholesale change.
Yes.
And I kind of worry that I watched the launch of the new Prosper UK movement and the video that they put out, and it was a kind of to me, it sounded a bit like a kind of zombie Cameronism, but there was this jangly foyer music, and they were talking in generalities about, we want to, more jobs, look after the economy. And I agree that's really important, and it's a place where the Tories actually have an opportunity to be competitive, because Reform UK are not fully trusted on the economy yet, and they have a big spending manifesto that I don't think adds up. So there is obviously a great opportunity there, and the Tories should never ignore business, and the contribution of someone like Andy Street is very important, and there's a reason he got so close to winning in Birmingham last time. But I also think that they need to realise that on certain issues, centrism is not where they think it is. Centrism wants radically lower migration. Centrism wants to stop the boats and probably to send a great number of those currently in hotels back to where they came from. And these guys, I don't think, have an answer on that stuff, but they also don't think that it's that worthy of discussion. They think that it's a bit grubby that people like Neil O'Brien, but also, Robert Jenrick before have even been raising these issues. This is the strong impression that they give. The economy is obviously deeply, deeply important, but it's not the only important issue. And when under their watch, a lot of the mistakes that led to actually very bad economic performance, an insane energy policy, that happened under Theresa May, that they've got their fingerprints all over this stuff, so, net zero by 2050, etc. It's actually a real danger if the impression is given that if you are a right-leaning, small or large C, that these people are now the face of it. I feel like maybe Kemi Badenoch should try and do something to make it clear that this is a wing rather than a takeover of the party.
Pro-business economic liberals with a hankering for greater European integration are basically in the position that the Free Democrats are in Germany, or various different centrist movements have been in France. The electoral marketplace for that, however attractive it might be to, smart people, is under 10%. That's not to say, exactly as you've pointed out, that a party of the right shouldn't be pro-enterprise, but unless it has answers on, or a position on, a range of other issues which are identifiably conservative, then it is unanchored. It risks becoming, to paraphrase David Goodhart, the party of anywheres, not somewheres. Now, there's an irony in that both Andy Street and Ruth Davidson very strongly have past political identities as somewheres. Andy Street is quintessentially an advocate for the West Midlands. Ruth Davidson is the preeminent advocate of Scottish unionism.
But Andy Street, and I do respect him, I think there's a reason that he did so well, even when the Tories were about as popular as anthrax at the time. But I do feel that there's sometimes been a hesitation to talk about some of the problems in Birmingham.
Yes.
From Andy Street. The fact that we have this rampant sectarianism. Nick Timothy, who is another man who comes from the West Midlands, has really campaigned hard on the issue. And we saw with what he and others revealed about the Tel Aviv Maccabee West Midlands police decision, that we don't have policing without fear or favour, that policing in certain parts of the country is now done with recourse to the risk of some kind of vigilante mob violence, and in consultation with so-called community leaders. It's objectively two-tier, and I do feel again, I've not heard much from these guys about that very serious problem.
No, I think that is fair. I think that Andy saw it as his role to be optimistic about the West Midlands' future and Birmingham's potential. And he was a very effective mayor and very effective in links to the business community.
Yes.
But it is also the case that the social, the demographic, the sectarian challenges in Birmingham were not issues that he highlighted during his time as mayor. That may have been prudent, but it does mean that these problems, and I'm sure he would say that they're the fault of Birmingham Council rather than anything that he did, but these problems went unaddressed. And I think that, again, is part of the challenge, because another one of the challenges of our times is that, well, of course people want the economy to be firing on all cylinders. A narrow pro-business view also generates some concerns, because it was business's short-term advocacy of a relaxation of migration rules under the Conservatives that stoked the Boris wave and the anxiety about this issue, which became such a debilitating factor in Conservative popularity.
The Tory response to the budget was considered to have been successful. And I think it was because to a lot of people watching the response, it wasn't just about talking about how Rachel Reeves's numbers didn't add up and how the economy was manifestly getting worse, but they also did quite a lot of work into looking at how much you now have to be earning so that with the relaxation of the child benefit cap, it is actually worth going to work if you're a family with kids, for example. And it turns out to be quite a surprisingly and quite scarily high figure before it's actually worthwhile to not be on benefits. I think that spoke to a lot of people in Britain who work extremely hard, who may be kind of middle or kind of upper, but they're living in parts of the country where cost of living is so high that they don't feel rich, even if left-wing people would tell them that they're plutocratic on, 80 grand a year or whatever. And they're being absolutely rinsed by the tax system. And meanwhile, it's increasingly a viable route to not work, or to work a kind of, the minimum number of hours, the maximum number of hours you can do before you start to lose your universal credit entitlements. And I really felt that actually they were speaking for a particular group of people who were not really being represented by anyone else properly. And it's so important in politics that you have people that you're there for. You've got your kind of constituency, and every successful political movement in British history has had people that it was, you dance with the one that brung you.
Quite.
And I worry that that's a bit of a danger if there's too much of a overt pivot to the centre, that you end up being praised by, let's say, people who now vote Lib Dem or even Labour, but they won't vote for you. They still hate the Tories. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, there is that. And of course, some of the people who celebrate Rob Jenrick or Suella Braverman joining Reform are false friends to Kemi Badenoch, and some of the projection onto the Conservative Party, or to what it should be, is a desire to have, in effect, controlled opposition. But I don't think that Kemi Badenoch is ever likely to submit to such a role herself.
There have been a lot of defections just in the last 2 weeks, 3 MPs in 2 weeks. I mean, even if we can talk about the merits or demerits of the Tory reform positions, but just three MPs in 2 weeks just feels, to lose one parent, etc. Who do you think could be next?
I'm going to stick my neck out and also risk assassination later this evening. I think that the number one suspect for defection at the moment is not Sir John Hayes, who is Suella and Rob Jenrick's friend, nor Sir Edward Lee, who is also a big Suella and Rob fan, and certainly not Jack Rankin or Katie Lamb or Lewis Cocking, who were the sort of, the young Turks behind Rob's leadership bid. I think it is Gavin Williamson. Gavin, the former chief whip, I think, has a fingertip feeling for power. And he has a taste for intrigue, obviously, but an aptitude for putting himself at the heart of events. And I think that the temptation to be at the heart of what Reform are doing will prove very great. From Gavin, if you're listening and this is absolutely not true, I can only apologise, and we'd be delighted to interview you as you explain why it is that you are backing Kemi 100%.